Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Forgive me for speaking in English and not Turkish. A few weeks ago, I was coming back from a holiday and I was reading the in-flight magazine, as you do, and they'd done a survey of 2,000 passengers asking what would make their ideal holiday. And the answer was, of course, a combination. It said they wanted a Spanish climate, Japanese transport, Turkish food, Caribbean beaches, and then an English sense of humor, which I assume is because when it all goes wrong, that's what you need. But I know I won't be needing a sense of humor here. It's a real delight to be in Istanbul and an honor to have been invited to speak to you this morning. Over the next few minutes, I'd like to give you a personal view, obviously from a UK perspective, of the opportunities and challenges facing tourism today, and to really make a call for coordinated action between destinations, governments, and travel organizers to ensure the continued success of the tourism industry. I hope my views are interesting to Turkey, which is, of course, a very major destination for UK travelers. I do think that tourism is at a critical moment in 2016, where growth in demand, but pressure on resources and international instability, combined with some very short-sighted tax systems, I think are putting at risk the real benefits that tourism can bring. Just a very few words about ABTA for those who are unfamiliar with the organization. As has just been said, we're the largest travel association in the UK. We have tour operators, cruise companies, travel agents, and collectively account for about 30 billion of consumer spend, and that's before the money they spend in the UK prior to traveling and the money they spend in destination. Unusually for an association, we are also a regulator, so we are one of the bodies that provide financial protection as required by law. We have a code of conduct about setting standards, and that's very important to customers, so we have a very high consumer recognition in the UK as a brand. And lastly, we have been for many years very engaged in the operations of our members, particularly in areas such as health and safety, crisis management, and now increasingly sustainability. And that's relevant for some of the comments I'm about to make. Let's start with the positives. I believe, as I guess most of the people in the room do, that tourism is a great force for good in the world. It creates jobs and wealth, often in destinations that have limited other economic resources. It reduces isolationism and mutual suspicion, and it provides precious moments of rest and escape for the soul. And it's growing. International arrivals have passed well beyond 1 billion and continue to grow. New destinations are emerging to meet the needs of new customers, and innovation has changed forever the way in which people purchase and experience their holidays. As for Turkey, more than 1 million British holidaymakers came here last year. In addition to a wonderful climate, cuisine, and history, you have invested in very modern, all-inclusive product. You have a very strong service ethos and professionally trained managers. So what's the problem, I hear you all ask? Well, for Turkey, I mean, strong though last year's performance was, it was down from a high in 2010, and that I think reflects how competitive the international tourism market is and how price sensitive it is as well. And current bookings are sharply down because of the international situation with which we're all very familiar. But beyond Turkey, there are some general structural questions that need to be answered. You know, ABTA, we see tourism as a kind of commercial ecosystem, if you will, where customers, travel organizers, supply chains, destinations, and governments all coexist and interact. When we talk about sustainability, we mean not only environmental and social sustainability, but the long-term viability of the tourism industry. When the industry is working well. It creates a virtuous circle, which I'll take you around, which have happy customers, shared benefits, profits, and reinvestment. And our challenge as travel professionals is to keep that circle intact. Everything starts and ends for us with successful businesses. As a trade association, we're funded by companies and believe firmly in a free market, in competition and innovation. But those companies have to be guided by a set of core values which recognize more than just shareholder returns and short-term shareholder returns. Those can't be the only measure of success. To attract investment and reinvestment, businesses need to ensure that the whole economic system is in balance. And this cycle follows the sort of profit and loss, if you will, of the industry. So, I'll start with quality product. This is a challenge, particularly in the face of rising demand. Obviously, we need the industry to invest in new planes and new hotels to replace old stock. But we also need to recognize that there are important parts of the product that no individual company can control. Take, for instance, airports. This is obviously a very important part of the customer experience. Delays at airports, poor service, waiting outside in baking heat, or unreliable taxis all have a very high impact on customer satisfaction. Yet few destinations, and I include the UK, have a coherent airport strategy, often switching between public and private ownership without adequate oversight. And you may know that we've been battling for years to get additional runway capacity in the southeast of England, and we've still got a way to go to get that. So one of the top priorities for tourism, I would say, is invest in airports. The second challenge to delivering a quality product is just the sheer weight of numbers. Low airfares have opened up international destinations to vastly increased numbers of travelers, and the rise of the sharing economy means that it's harder to control tourism volumes through issuing bed licenses. And we're now seeing major destinations trying to take reactive measures to limit visitors. So tourist quality, not quantity, is my second plea. Don't just measure the number of international arrivals, but rather look at how you maximize the value of that tourist experience and that touristic trip. Assuming that you have a quality product, which certainly Turkey has, you do need to have some customers. Now's not the time to go into how the internet and the opening of air routes via low-cost carriers have changed the travel landscape and the way that travel is sold. I think enough to say that what used to be a kind of orderly tennis match is now much more like a rugby, I have to use an English game, rugby scrum, where a multitude of businesses and business models compete within borders and across borders. But confident customers, confidence is still a key component of the travel sale. Holidays are often purchased well in advance of departure. The financial outlay can be significant, and the holiday is bought on trust. Trust that the holiday will be as advertised and safe, and that the company that sold it to you will still be there to deliver it. The European Union has just ratified a new package travel directive which will significantly extend the scope of financial protection beyond traditional packages. And at ABTA, we've supported that move, which will bring some of our own members into regulation for the first time in order to prevent consumer detriment and to create fair competition. We'd like to see that extension of protection go further to include arrangements where the customer clicks through from one site to another, clearly putting a holiday together. And also we need to see how far regulation is needed for the sharing economy, which is growing fast. But it's a start, the new directive. So my third plea is let's make sure that that is properly enforced across Europe. Just by the way, I thought it was interesting, to see what happened in Russia when they cancelled the program to Sharm el-Sheikh, and the number of people. There is no mechanism for protection there, and the outrage at home from people who suddenly realized they'd lost their deposits and their monies was extraordinary. And we've learned to take that for granted, but it's a very important part of keeping consumers confident. As I said, the customer has also a very legitimate expectation that the holiday will be a safe one. As the range of accommodation options has exploded, the difficulty of making sure that it's safe has grown. There's a whole legal industry built on defining who is responsible for safety and for breaches of safety. Our view is that everyone in the supply chain is responsible for the welfare of the customer. To minimize risk, it's vital that those who have the most information and the power of intervention should take the lead. In the case of tourist accommodation, this is clearly the accommodation owner who maintains and runs the facility on a daily basis. But there are no common standards of tourism accommodation safety across the EU. This not only makes it harder for travel companies to manage risk, but puts travelers traveling under their own steam or staying in unlicensed accommodation at greater risk. We've been pushing for a tourism accommodation safety directive for several years to address this problem. We've met strong resistance, I have to say, and not made huge progress, but I continue to believe that it's an important part of sustaining consumer confidence in the future, and we'll continue our efforts. Perhaps the hardest issue in the area of consumer confidence, certainly at the moment, is global security and terrorism. The appalling events last year in Tunisia and Paris and the downing of the Russian plane back from Sharm el-Sheikh were tragic for the victims and their families, but they also sent shockwaves through the industry, not just in terms of the immediate response and the closing down of destinations, but in terms of how we assess risk in the future and how we deal with events and with customer fear. There is no, in my view, quick solution to this for the travel industry, particularly as tourists are seen, sadly, as soft targets, but with a high political capital. But there are some things we can do to help. I think the most important is to give accurate and prompt information. The last thing that consumers want, from my experience, is public relations, it's fine, don't worry, everything's open. They need to have clear information about if there's a problem, where it is, and what they should be doing, particularly in a world of 24-hour media coverage and social media coverage. I think the second thing is to really focus on those travel nodes, if I can put it. Airports are an obvious example where sheer throughput creates a security challenge, where customers feel the greatest vulnerability and where the power to disrupt is greatest. The reality is that nowhere is 100% safe at present, and that includes London or the UK where people live. But the risk of death or injury from terrorism is very small, much smaller than that of dying from a swimming accident if you're a tourist. But people live on emotion, not on statistics. And the destinations need to help us to help you. We are a conduit for information back to the consumers, and we need to have that very, very strong confidence and strong information link to the destinations. Talking of destinations, let me talk briefly about sustainability. As I said a moment ago, when I speak of sustainability, I'm talking about economic as well as ecological sustainability. The travel industry needs destinations to thrive, to prosper, to feel they're getting a good economic and social return from tourism, and that locals feel at ease with their visitors. And it relates to how we manage our environmental footprint. So let me take these two headings together. Without a managed approach to the environmental and social aspects of tourism, the quality of the product will erode, and that will drive down customer demand and make it harder to attract new investment, and will be in a vicious rather than a virtuous circle. Tourism that is sustainably managed provides, in my view, a higher quality customer experience. Customers really don't want to feel that their holiday is based on unfair labor practices, and they're becoming increasingly aware of abuses and more demanding of travel companies. There's no doubt, I can see from my own mailbag at home. And of course, we need to be able to demonstrate to critics of tourism that we are able to manage the costs as well as deliver the benefits that tourism can bring. At ABTA, we work with members on their supply chains to improve sustainability. We've developed a very comprehensive accreditation system to help hotels meet acceptable environmental and social standards. And we work also very closely with ministers, with destination governments, to put in place practices and infrastructure, waste management and so forth, that will promote sustainability throughout the supply chain. This is not an easy journey, I have to say, but every step counts, and it does need leadership from the top. But we must embrace sustainability. There really is no choice if you want to stay competitive as a destination. Time's short, so I'll move very quickly through the rest of the cycle. Jobs. We know tourism creates jobs, and we believe these can be rewarding jobs. The skills of modern travel, digital, marketing, logistical are the skills of the modern economy. You may be aware that in the UK we're currently debating whether or not we're going to stay in the EU or leave it, which may seem strange to Turkey. And at ABTA we're going through an exercise to understand exactly what it would mean both for the travelling public and for the travel industry if we were to leave. But clearly one of the concerns of members is that we would lose access to a vast international labour and talent pool, which is so important for the travel industry. We'll see where the debate and the vote in the UK take us, but I think for the travel industry, open and competitive employment markets seem to be absolutely essential. I'm sure Mr. Barroso will have more to say on that shortly. Tax, we want to pay tax, you may be surprised to hear, but we want to pay it through income tax by employing lots of people and corporation tax on a successful industry, not through top-line sales taxes that slow down demand. In the UK, the government raises more than £2 billion a year through departure taxes, which depresses demand both for inbound people, because they're going to go home at some stage, and outbound. And other destinations around the world occasionally put in arrivals taxes or room taxes, which have a similar effect. So the plea to governments is, to support the industry and take the tax from the bottom of the profit and loss statement, not at the top. And finally, to complete the circle, we do need to tell customers, destinations and governments about the contribution we're making to developing economies and to the welfare of their own citizens. This is not just out of vanity, but because we need public sector support for infrastructure investments, for the right regulations and for tax structures that support such a major and critical industry. I wasn't sure what to put in the middle of the circle to end. I thought maybe leadership, that's important, values, those are important, but finally I'll just put our own brand. And the reason why I did this, again, it's not because of an advertisement for ABTA. The customers in the UK really identify with this brand. They see, our advertising campaign is look for the logo, and it makes the customers feel confident that they're travelling reputable businesses and that the holiday experience is going to be a good one. ABTA and our members have a huge amount of experience built over many years, and having carried many hundreds of millions of passengers, we're very keen to make that available to a wider international market. Tourism is truly a global industry, and it's in everyone's interest that the future is built on strong foundations. We have a role to play, as does everyone in this room. Thank you very much.